Welcome everyone to episode 389 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentelaresco. I write stuff in podcast 2. Today, we conclude chapter 4 of The Cloud Diver. And once that's done, we have a very special guest today in Fonda Lee. Fonda Lee is reading. I'll let her tell you what she's reading. It's kind of a fun little bonus, I think, for anybody that's a fan of J8 City. I was really impressed that she was willing to do this, and I cannot thank Fonda enough for coming on my show to read from her work. Fonda, yeah, I'll say more nice things about you when we get to it, but let's talk about this week. I am going to be officially doing When Words Collide next August. I have 3 panels for people and presentations for people to come and see. The first one is podcasting. I do this panel every year. This one's a little different because it's going to be obviously via Zoom. The event will be posted shortly, and it'll be a lot of fun. And it's going to take everything I've learned from the last few years and put it all together into one big package. Number 1. Number 2, I'm going to be doing advertising in the apocalypse. This one's, I think, my favorite one. It's the one I'm actually putting the most work in. I find a lot of authors are neglectful when it comes to this part of their game, and it's the advertising. And I think that's a big reason why a lot of authors are part-timers. And I'm going to go into details of why, especially now, you should advertise, what you can do, and what actually constitutes advertisement, because that can be a whole variety of things. And I'm going to go through a few of those things. And finally, so I quit my job and became a freelancer, which is going to talk about everything I've been going through the last few months, what I've learned, and how I've slowly been evolving and getting contacts, my advantages, my disadvantages, what I've learned. If you want to learn how to fail fast, this is going to be your panel, I promise. But all right, first things first, let's conclude chapter 4 of The Cloud Diver, and then from there, we'll keep going. All right.
Think you have what it takes to survive? Then get your ass to Mars. Get Your Ass to Mars is the latest simulation sensation courtesy of Indie Imprint. You are pitted against the hostile nature of Mars. Can you survive and pave the way for future colonists? Or will you succumb to the many pitfalls and obstacles in your way? Get Your Ass to Mars, the Dragon Edition, is available now on PC and Steam. Go to indieimprint.com for more details.
The Cloud Diver, Level 1-4, Chapter 5. Feed Void Life. The_truth at The Truth Is Out There. Unverified account at Corporate Worship. I'm sorry if I offend your corporate sensibilities. I do not like companies. No one knows what they are doing and how far they are reaching. Hashtag what is real. How do you know what's inside him, I asked. Oh, please, Gunblade scoffed. You think I haven't thought to count down from 5 to get that information out of you? I gulped. I'd squeal to the high heavens if it prevented me from finding out what happened at 5. So why rescue me? Atlas answered first. The truth is we want to see what you knew about the cloud. Few knew of its existence, and we want to see if you were connected to void life in some way. Cloud? The place you followed me into, said Gunblade. Cloud. That was a much nicer name than everything past the library. Now that I think of it, the twisty, misty appearance it did project seem kind of look like one in the distance. Although why it was like a twisted image of the Void Life Tower was a mystery to me. When I confirmed that you followed me as you said you did, we discussed how to retrieve the file. The Ouroboros cartel forced our hand, Atlas interjected, so the question is, where did you hide the daemon? Wait a minute, I interjected. How do you know what was going on? Gunblade actually had a grin on his face and just a touch of a blush. I made sure the file you had was traceable. Once I got you out of there... How did you escape? I remember the killing blow and the crunch of the club on bone. She couldn't have moved that fast. I would rather not talk about it. Gone later on to the topic at hand. Where is the daemon? It was my turn to blush. I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I told him about my conversation with Adam and Chester, how, in desperation, I had sent Stevie wide to safety. Well, that changes some things, Atlas frowns. We'll have to hurry, Gunblade said, and hurry for what? Hurry didn't sound like anything fun. It meant more danger and adventure and pain had just gotten away and wait. Was I serious about this? I mean, it's not like I had anything to go back to. There were some weird zombie Borgs and wizards coming after me. Void Life and I would probably never be on speaking terms again. This seemed like a terrible idea the more I thought about it. I want to go, I said. Do you? Gunblade asked. I need to. Stevie Y is my friend. Your friend? A machine? Atlas Capod? Yeah, he's a machine, I said, my voice moving an octave deeper. That problem? He's a light bulb, Atlas chuckled. You can make another one. Like hell I can. I looked in Atlas' eye and didn't blink. I wasn't shaking. I was angry. Atlas blinked. Inside me, a roaring volcano wanted to burst. My face probably had a pinkish tinge to it already. I didn't give a damn in this moment who I pissed off or that Atlas had helped save me. The only thing that mattered to me was my friend in the cloud. It may be true that Stevie Y started out as lines of code I'd scrapped together in college. Something had happened in Stevie Y's life, though. I may have created him, but Stevie Y was his own man. He experienced his thoughts. He dreamed and laughed and cried. How could I look at a little glowing sign as anything but a person just like me? Lines of code or letters in deoxyribonucleic acid. It's all language in the end. Just because Stevie Y came from my imagination didn't make him any less real. I had made him, and I'll be damned if I'll let anyone tell me different. I knew I was outmatched. This small man in my line of sight broke into a corporate building to haul me out of there. He could probably kick mine behind 6 ways from Sunday. But in this moment, I didn't care. Gunblade cop, are we done? Yeah, Atlas said back. We are. Good fire, kid. Johnny, I said. Johnny. Atlas smiled and turned to Gunblade. I think we got a new recruit. Him? We're doomed. Hey, I answered. I heard that. You were supposed to. Gunblade managed a halfway warm chuckle. We got a couple hours left. See your doctor, friend. Cloud Diver, Level 1-4, Chapter 6. Feed, Void Life. The_truth, at the truth is out there, unverified account. The only good thing about this dragon flu is that it reminds you that family matters. I know that's more than most. What's your truth? I had a couple of hours, and in truth, I wanted to see my buddy. After all, he was responsible for me being tied up by nurse ninjas and shot with drugs. That earned a punch in the face. Friends do that to each other, right? The receptionist was super cooperative in finding his office. I marched to his door and just by a fraction resisted the urge to kick it in. I said the polite thing and knocked. Come in, Scott ushered me in. The voice was so happy my desire to throttle him increased by a factor of 9,000. I roared into the door to find Scott reading a report that looked similar to the file I had on the cloud. He saw my look and backfired. Okay, I don't blame you for this, Scott waved his hand and surrendered, but it was for your own good, and you helped a lot of people. I blinked as the last sentence as it was processed. Okay, how? I wanted to confirm that your company had given you the latest and best medication they could buy, which they did, and it confirmed the theory. Spell it out. Now I wanted to hit him again. Well, from what I could tell, anyone that worked for a big company had more immunity than most. Nutrition is part of it, but no one I knew that worked at Chimera, Void Life, or Lodgers registered even a sniffle. Now, that is unexpected. A cold or something that indicates the body is under attack in proximity to an outbreak like this is expected, but you and everyone that works for the company were protected from this outbreak. Can you build a cure? I can work on something thanks to your blood, Scott said, but the file you found would be a great help to this. One doctor in another hospital had a student who was studying ancient viruses, and they noticed a correlation between the older viruses and the contagion today. Your partners were searching for a model of an older virus for us to break down. So this disease is everywhere? Reality kept hitting me over the head with stakes in my adventure. How many other cities were like Golden? Were they all crippled and started to make it to another day? Not everywhere, but in enough places. Chimera and their genetic perfection seems to have this under control. Everywhere else varies. Void Life territory seems to be hit worse as the Big Five. I see. Scott sighed, standing up and stretching. Either some company was attacking Void Life with the virus, or far more likely, Void Life was experimenting on its own populace. My initial reaction was to try to defend Void Life. I was about to mouth off some platitude protesting my former employer's innocence. But my last 48 hours hit me. If my company was willing to try to kill me, with zombie mobsters and not care a whit about any collateral damage I may cause, who's to say what they are capable of? I worked for the bad guys. Terrific. Guilt kicked me right in the stomach. I sat down, all thoughts of hunting Scott out were quelched by shame. You believe me? After my last few days, yeah, I admitted. You've come a long way, Johnny. I always thought you were a little oblivious. I decided to keep my mouth shut. Truth was, I still was very oblivious. The world was a far darker place than it had been a few days ago, and I was groping around trying to find something, anything to cling to. I was starting to wonder if there was any lie that I still believed at this point. Level 1-4 cleared. And that was Chapter 4 of The Cloud Diver. Thanks, everybody, for reading and listening to got to this point. I've enjoyed this. Obviously, I've gone minimalistic. I'm going to be doing some more sound effects when we get to Part 5 and 6, as we get more and more back into the cloud, as we're going back to the more digital world. Because the digital world's a different place, and I love the training scenes that are about to come up. Oh my god, I had such a blast writing it. I hope you guys have a blast listening to it. But let's continue down this road today, shall we? I'm really honored that Fonda Lee decided to come and do this. She didn't have to. Fonda. So I got to share a panel. I remember this like 2-3 years ago. I got to do a panel with Fonda Lee. Fonda Lee, Adam Dries, and Eric Nelson, Del Suelo. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? Fonda is probably one of the best writers of our time. She's probably, when she listens to this, she goes like, yeah, bullshit. No, it's honest. She's a great science fiction writer. She has the abilities and sensibilities of Asimov. There's a little Heinlein in her stuff. She has all the classic Le Guin. I think there's a lot of Le Guin in what she does. And I look at all the grandmasters in science fiction, and Fonda belongs in that category. She puts a lot of work and thought in her stuff, and her fantasy stuff's amazing. Jade City is awesome. I really, really, really dig the Gangs of New York magic combo, and I've seen those neighborhoods. I am so impressed with the background she has put into that, and I could sing her praises forever. But she's also an amazing human being. I am a little jealous of her. I'm gonna tell you this right now. She wrote freaking Shang-Chi. The comic Swordmaster. This is gonna be, I think, the biggest compliment. She made Craig Pak look good. Craig Pak is a very competent writer, but I found once Fonda was part of the package with Swordmaster, it was better, a lot better. And Shang-Chi's an amazing concept, and I would love to see her do it. I really would. But that all said, let's get to Fonda, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
Hello everyone, Fonda Lee here, author of the Green Bone Saga, the Exoduology, and other works of science fiction and fantasy. When Josh asked me to do a reading on his podcast, I debated what I ought to share with you all. You see, for the past year, I've been focused on writing the third and final book in the Green Bone Saga. For those of you who aren't familiar with my work, the Green Bone Saga is an epic urban fantasy series starting with Jade City, which came out in 2017 and won some awards, including the Aurora Award and the World Fantasy Award, and was followed by Jade War, which came out in 2019 and is up for an Aurora Award this year. The third book, Jade Legacy, is scheduled to come out next year in 2021, so anything that I read from that book is going to be full of spoilers for the first two. But I have an idea to try something a bit different with this reading. The Green Bone Saga takes place on a fictional, Asia-inspired island called Kekon. In each of the three books, there are 3 narrative interludes that provide an omniscient view background into the mythology and history of Kekon and the culture of its Greenbone warriors, who are the elite of this island, able to enhance their powers by wearing magical jade. What I haven't done before is read all 9 of these interludes together to create a journey through the history of Kekon. So that's what I'm going to do. The last 3 vignettes are not published yet, so fair warning that they might change between now and when you see them in print. But they also won't spoil anything about the story. So, here we go. Heaven and Earth. Long ago in heaven, according to Deitist teachings, the great extended family of gods lived in dazzling palaces of jade. Like any large family, the gods had their share of quarrels, but for the most part they went about their immortal lives happily, although once they had children and those children had children, residential space in heaven grew too tight for comfort. So the gods constructed a second home, which they modeled after the first and called Earth. Earth was, at first, in every way as beautiful as heaven, with vast seas, high mountains, lush forests, and countless wondrous plants and animals. Unfortunately, the numerous children of the gods, having grown up spoiled, fell to squabbling over Earth even before it was completed. Several wanted the same ocean. Others bickered over who would take the highest mountain range or the biggest continent. At last, the fighting grew so constant and unbearable that the godparents grew enraged. "We built a perfect home for you, and this is how you repay us, by spoiling it with pettiness, greed, and jealousy, turning brother against brother, sister against sister. Have earth, then, but suffer for it, as you'll have nothing else from us." And the parents stripped their children of their divine powers, made them small and weak and naked, and exiled them from heaven. Yato, the father of all, blasted to shards the first and only half-constructed jade palace on earth, and buried it under a mountainous island. The gods, though, being parents, could not resist keeping an eye on their struggling, estranged children. Some, like Thana the moon, or Poya, the goddess of agriculture, took pity on their descendants and hovered close, helping to light their way at night, or ensuring they had enough food to eat. Others, like Yofo the typhoon god, or Sagi the pestilence, refused to give up their grudges, and unless placated, would descend on occasion to remind humanity of its long-standing offenses. All earthly conflict, so the deitist philosophers say, stems from the original offense of the children against their parents and of siblings against one another. All human progress and virtuous striving is likewise an attempt to achieve familial forgiveness and a return to the spiritually and physically divine state, which lies latent but distantly remembered. The One Who Returned. The most well-known scripture of the deitist religion, the Pact of the Return, is the story of a pious man named Genshu, who, a very long time ago, spoke out against the evils of a despotic king and was forced to leave his land. He packed his large family, including his younger brothers and sisters and their families, onto a great ship and went in search of the fabled ruins of the original Jade Palace on Earth. After 40 years of sailing the earth, stopping but never settling, aided by some gods and hampered by others, surviving adventures that would form the basis for many myths in Kekanese culture, Genshu and his clan arrived on a lush and unspoiled island. Impressed by his dedication and piousness, Yato, the father of all, spoke to Genshu, who was by now an old man, and led him into the mountains where he found stones of jade, the remains of the divine home once meant for humankind, a gift from the gods. While his family constructed a village by the shore, Genshu retired to a hermit's life of meditation in the mountains. Surrounded by jade, Genshu developed and mastered godlike wisdom and abilities, growing ever closer to a state of divine virtue. His grandchildren and great-grandchildren would seek him out to ask for his help, and he would emerge briefly from his isolation to settle disputes, quell earthquakes, beat back storms, and repel barbarian invaders. When he was 300 years old, the gods agreed that Genshu alone, of all their human descendants, deserved to be brought home to heaven. Devout Kekanese deitists consider themselves the descendants of Genshu and closest in favor to the gods. Greenbones who practice the religion today trace their way of life to Genshu's favorite nephew, Baijen, who went into the mountains to learn from his uncle, and, after Genshu's departure from the earth, became the protector of the island's people, the first and fiercest jade warrior in island legend. While all Kekanese revere Genshu as the one who returned, only Greenbones consider themselves close enough to his legacy to refer to him simply as Old Uncle. Upon Genshu's ascendance, the gods further proclaimed that when the rest of humankind followed Genshu's example and achieved the 4 divine virtues of humility, compassion, courage, and goodness, then they too would be welcomed back to godliness. All deitists believe in this final promised occurrence, which they call the return. Baijen's triumph. In Kekanese religious mythology, Old Uncle Genshu, the one who returned, had a favorite nephew named Baijen, who remains the country's most well-known and revered ancient hero. Stories of Baijen, the courageous green bone warrior, have been told to Kekanese children for hundreds of years, and more recently, comic books and films have recounted his adventures and deeds. Unlike his divine uncle Genshu, however, Baijen remains a mortal champion and is not worshipped as a god. According to legend, when Baijen was finally slain in furious battle against his greatest foe, the invading Tuni general Sha'ak, he was recognized by the gods for his valor and accorded a place in heaven. From his vantage point in the divine realm, Baijen looked down upon the earth. He witnessed his remaining men fighting and dying in his name, and saw that his people were on the verge of being conquered. He watched, helpless, as his beloved, grief-stricken wife prepared to throw herself from the cliff before the oncoming army could reach their mountainside home. In a panic, Baijen begged the gods to allow him to return to Earth for one night and give up his place in heaven to another. At first, his request was refused, but Baijen was immovable in his pleas. He wailed and beat his head on the steps of the Jade Palace, refusing to be deterred, until Yato, the father of all, taking pity on him, agreed. The fallen warrior fell at the feet of the gods and wept in gratitude. That very night, he returned to Earth, sweeping over the battlefields littered with bodies, and entered the tent of the Tuni general. He burst in upon his shocked enemy, and laughing in triumph, killed him where he stood in his underclothes. In accordance with the pact Baijen had made with the gods, the soul of General Sha'ak flew to heaven. Baijen, the savior of his people, was left to roam the earth as an exiled spirit for all eternity. Green bones have an old saying, "Pray to Genshu, but be like Baijen." Lost and Found. A well-known figure in the ancient history of the Tun Empire is a man named Ganlu, who was a warrior, healer, religious philosopher, and advisor to Emperor Shajan III. Ganlu is described in Tuni historical texts as a bearded foreigner who came from the island in the west. Accounts differ as to the date of his arrival, but it is said that when he saw the vast plains of the great basin of Tun, he fell to his knees and praised the gods, famously exclaiming, in a phrase that would later be appropriated by various Tuni rulers and generals as justification for imperial expansion, "Glorious land, where a man can walk for his whole life and never reach the sea." Ganlu traveled for many years. In the wake of recent famine and war, the Tun countryside was plagued with lawlessness and banditry, against which common villagers were often helpless. Wherever Ganlu went, he confronted crime and immorality, taught martial skills to the ordinary people, treated sickness and ailments with his healing touch, and espoused a philosophy of peaceful living, neighborly obligation, and communion with the divine spirits of the land, rivers, and sky. His teachings formed the basis for Krajau, the Tuni fighting arts, and greatly influenced the Shubai religion. Eventually, the traveler's reputation reached the ears of the emperor, who summoned Ganlu and his disciples to the palace and asked him to become a royal advisor. Ganlu refused 3 times before consenting, each time asking the emperor to offer evidence of his virtues as a monarch. Ganlu's acumen as a counselor and the founding of his schools of Krajau are recounted in further legends which differ in detail, but hold in common that Ganlu derived extraordinary power and wisdom from an enchanted stone given to him by his forest goddess mother, and which he wore close to his heart at all times. It is said that Ganlu lived until the age of 170. Upon his death, his spirit went into the stone, which was kept in the imperial palace, so that the emperor could continue to consult it. While historians agree that Ganlu was a Kekanese greenbone, and that his teachings bear considerable resemblance to both Abuke folklore and pre-deitist spirituality, only recently have they concluded that he was most likely the 3rd son of the King of Jan during the early part of the Three Crowns period in Kekanese history. Kekan has no record of this man, other than a royal genealogy set down at the time with an unnamed reference to a young prince, lost. The Two Thrones. Following the Three Crowns era in Kekanese history, which ended with the self-destruction of the Hunto royal line, the two conquering kingdoms, Jan in the north and Tiedo in the south, sought to maintain peaceful relations in the time-honored way by exchanging royal children. The second son of the royal house of Tiedo was sent to the court of Jan. The monarch of Jan had 3 children, but only 1 son, so the eldest daughter was offered up instead as a hostage to Tiedo. In Tiedo, the captive Jan princess and the firstborn prince fell deeply and fortuitously in love and were married. Once the prince succeeded his father, however, his wife pressured him to attack her homeland of Jan in a bid to rule all of Kekan. Historians debate how much she was driven by political ambition, blind confidence in her husband, or ill feelings toward the family that had traded her away. The new king was initially hesitant, but after his younger brother, in John, perished in a suspicious training accident, he acted on his wife's encouragement and declared war. Their rival, the Prince of John, was intelligent but sickly. Though it was rare for women to be trained as greenbones at that time, his younger sister was allowed to learn the jade disciplines. She married a warrior who would become a famous general in the John army, and she subsequently became a key figure in the military campaign against her sister and brother-in-law from Taito. The final victory of John, 200 years later, unified the island under one monarchy, with its capital city located on the northern coast, where it remains to this day. Although the strife between the northern and southern kingdoms extended long past the lives of its instigators, this segment of Kekkone's history is still known as the Warring Sisters period. The Kekkonese hold an overall negative view of this era, as the prolonged conflict weakened the country and reduced the population of its jade warriors, allowing successive foreign invaders to gain a foothold on the island. Nevertheless, judging by the disproportionate number of Kekkonese novels and movies set during this time, the love story between the traitorous John princess and the Taito prince is considered one of history's great romances, and the resulting war between the two sisters recounted as one of its tragic dramas. Keikon's most famous classical play about this period, The Two Thrones, begins with an oft-quoted line that harkens to deitist philosophy regarding the origin of earthly conflict. Out of small resentments spring great wars. The Cursed Beauty. 800 years ago, a renowned Eleusinian explorer named Gaubret sailed across the sea in search of a fabled island with mountains of jewels guarded by giants. Upon successfully landing on the southern peninsula of Keikon, Gaubret was pleased and relieved to encounter no giants, but instead an Abuke village. After a tense but peaceful exchange with the village elders, the natives brought the half-starved travelers food and water, and Gaubret and his crew set up camp by the shore. As grateful as they were, the sailors could not help but greedily notice the green gemstones hanging over the tribe's simple dwellings and decorating the bodies of the men and women. Even before the rise of the Kekkonese warrior caste of Greenbones, jade was of significant cultural importance to the Aboriginals, who viewed it as the divine remains of the first mother goddess Numuna, and, being genetically immune to its effects, wore it for status and ceremony. Gaubret proceeded to barter a considerable amount of his ship's wares in exchange for the villagers' jade, which they seemed more than willing to trade in exchange for foreign tools and curiosities. Gaubret stored the acquired jade in a wooden chest in his tent, which he opened several times a day in order to admire his fortune. Once much-needed ship repairs had been completed, Gaubret and his crew made ready to set sail. At that point, it occurred to the explorer that there was a great deal more jade to be had, and that he had come an awfully long way across the ocean to be leaving with so little compared to how much these simple savages flaunted so carelessly. That night, Gaubret gathered his men and led them into the Abuke village, where they massacred the inhabitants and gathered every last bit of jade they could lay their hands on. In good spirits, they departed Keikon. Despite ample stores and good weather, over the following 2 months the ship descended into an inexplicable madness. Shortly after Gaubret hung 2 officers for treason, the crew mutinied. Gaubret and several others were killed, and their bodies tossed overboard. The storeroom lock was smashed, and the jade equally divided among the crew. 2 subsequent mutinies resulted in several more deaths. 6 sailors threw themselves into the sea. Others fell into a delirious fever and cut themselves with knives. One man was said to have pulled out his own eye and eaten it. A small group of beleaguered survivors, at last convinced that the treasure they carried was cursed, threw every piece of jade on the ship into the ocean and managed to limp their vessel into a port in southeastern Spenius. Their tragic tale quickly spread, cementing the Cursed Beauty as a faraway place of near-mythical wealth and mysterious evil fortune. 750 years after Gaubret's journey, the Shotarian general Damusaro famously disagreed with the National War Cabinet's decision to occupy Keikon, arguing, That damned island is like a beautiful woman with a barbed pussy, very tempting but not to be fucked. Perhaps as belated punishment for his vulgar objections, his superiors later sent him to command the garrison house in occupied Janloon during the Many Nations War. His name was whispered by the One Mountain Society, and despite obsessive security precautions, he was ambushed and killed in broad daylight by a young Green Bone assassin named Now Suenzen. The Long Judgment. The last king of Kekon, Eon II, presided over the darkest period of his nation's history and died as an ignominious failure. Kekon had been relatively peaceful and prosperous for 300 years following the unification of the nation under the royal family of John. But by the time Eon II ascended to the throne at the age of 19, the country was facing political upheaval. Foreign entities had established a presence on Kekon: the merchant Bramsko Explorers Guild from Steppenland, the Tuna Empire, which controlled the port city of Toshan in Kekon's southern peninsula, and the Shotarian navy that ruled the East Americ Ocean, were increasingly in conflict with each other and with the local population. In the wake of several violent incidents and allegations of foreign bribes paid to the royal family, the country's numerous Greenbone clans began to take sides against one another, with some remaining loyal to the beleaguered monarchy and others supporting its overthrow. When the Empire of Shotar invaded Kekon with the full might of its modern military, it faced a defending force of Jade warriors who possessed exceptional abilities but no comparable organization or unity. Despite this, the fighting was so fierce and casualties so high that documents later revealed Shotarian military commanders were prepared to burn the city of Janloon to the ground, arguing that otherwise every last Greenbone on the island would die fighting, each taking hundreds of enemy soldiers down with him. King Eon II was advised by his counselors to flee the country and continue the war in exile. Instead, the monarch commanded the clans to retreat. He surrendered to Shotar and abdicated the throne. The Shotarian government kept the former king in comfortable captivity, making his eventual death by poison at the hands of foreign overseers appear to be from natural causes. The Kekonese so widely reviled King Eon II as a coward and a weakling that when the monarchy was symbolically, if not functionally, re-established 50 years later, Eon's grandnephew, Ion III, reigned under the title of prince to distance himself from his hated relative. More recent historical scholarship has been kinder to Eon II. His seemingly premature capitulation is estimated to have saved millions of lives and enabled the country's remaining Greenbone warriors to regroup and form the One Mountain Society, the unconquerable national resistance network that would end Shotarian rule and be the precursor to today's modern clans. During his captivity, the former monarch urged peace and citizen cooperation with the foreign governors, but was later discovered to have sold off most of the royal family's possessions and secretly funneled the money to Greenbone guerrillas via lanternmen intermediaries. A Shotarian bodyguard who wrote a memoir about Eon II described him as private, bookish, and especially soft-hearted toward animals, the antithesis of the fierce and brutish Kekonese stereotype widely depicted by Shotarian propaganda. On his deathbed, the disgraced king is said to have lamented, "I'll be remembered not for who I was, but for what I wasn't. Perhaps it's for the best. Let the gods judge me for what I did not do." One Mountain. Wailon Temple School was founded, so the admissions office claims, over 600 years ago by 3 Greenbone masters, one of them a descendant of the legendary hero Baijen himself. They built their institution in the interior mountainous region of Kekon, where students could train close to nature and the gods, far from the concerns of common people. The families of prospective students had to travel by foot for 3 days in order to reach its gates. At that time, there were no large clans, such as the country has today, only many small local family clans throughout the island that kept their own jade and fighting methods and protected their own communities. The founding masters established Wylon to produce the island's most skilled and disciplined warriors, while schooling them in arts, sciences, and the traditions of the deitist faith. They accepted any student who could pass the entrance tests, regardless of what kingdom, family, or clan they hailed from. Wylon Temple School attracted trainees from Greenbone families all over the island of Caicon, as well as prominent masters who came to learn from their peers and refine their skills to pass on to the next generation of practitioners. Over the following centuries, Greenbone warriors developed into an increasingly prominent and influential social class, its members bound by common training methods and connections that can largely be traced back to the original Wylon Temple School. Today, there are over a dozen schools of martial study in Caicon, and while the more recently established Call Dushuran Academy rivals Wylon in size and prestige, the historical mystique of the Wylon name remains second to none. The current campus of Wylon Temple School, located 65 kilometers west of Janloon, was established after the Many Nations War by merging 3 separate secret training locations that operated during the foreign occupation of Caicon after the original Wylon Temple School was burned to the ground by Shotarian soldiers. Nearly 100 masters and trainees who tried to defend the school were captured, stripped of jade, imprisoned, tortured, and executed. Among those that escaped the purge was a 16-year-old trainee named Ait Ugantan, who led a group of younger students away from the assault and into the forest where they hid from Shotarian soldiers while their school and home burned all night, sending plumes of black smoke high into the air. In the morning, they fled into the wilderness ahead of Shotarian search parties until they were found by a scouting party from the local resistance cell. Ait U, who would later become known as the Spear of Caicon, stood protectively in front of the crying, exhausted group of younger children and demanded to know the name and clan of the scouting party's leader. The scout said, "My name is Call Sennington. My clan doesn't matter. Right now, all green bones in these mountains are brothers." The Charge of 20. In the final year of the Many Nations War, the Empire of Shotar relied heavily on its control of the East Americ Ocean, with the island of Caicon being its most significant asset. For this reason, the Charge of 20, a famous event in Kekanese history that is rarely studied by outsiders, is considered by some experts to be a far more important turning point in the global conflict than it's given credit for. The One Mountain Society's attack on the heavily fortified Shotarian military base near present-day Lukang was nearly a complete disaster. Shotarian spies provided advance warning of the assault, so the element of surprise was lost. Instead, the advancing Greenbone warriors were met with heavy artillery and twice the number of expected defenders. Leaving a small force inside the base, the Shotarians sallied into the surrounding area with superior numbers, encircling the rebels' position. When Call Dushuran realized that he and his warriors were trapped and facing slaughter, he gathered together 20 of his strongest greenbones, himself included, and 60 of his weaker and less experienced men. "This is the true test of our brotherhood," he said. "Only together can we turn certain defeat into victory." The 60 less powerful warriors willingly gave their jade to their commander and their more skilled peers. Wearing far more jade than their bodies could normally handle, was asking for death from the itches, but health effects were of no concern. That night, the 20 chosen greenbones cut their tongues on their knives to seal their commitment. Together, they struck the lightly defended Shotarian base with so much savagery and extraordinary jade ability that surviving witnesses claimed they leapt over walls and moved too fast for their enemies to see, that bullets flew away from them, and they killed soldiers with a single touch. 20 greenbones brought down the gates and slaughtered nearly 300 men before they were finally slain. Call Dushuran's torn body was hung from the watchtower. Several contingents of Shotarian soldiers rushed back to help defend the base. When dawn broke, the exhausted troops saw the entire force of the One Mountain Society warriors descending upon them. Believing that every greenbone would be as terrible and nearly unkillable a foe as the 20 sent in advance, the defenders panicked. Many of the soldiers were not even Shotarians, but Tuni, Uiwans, and other poorly trained conscripts brought from other parts of the empire. In the first wave of the attack, they fled or surrendered. The One Mountain Society spread news of the heroic Charge of 20 across the country through secret radio broadcasts, print, and word carried through the country's network of lanternmen. Within days, all of Kacon was in open rebellion against the remaining occupation forces. 2 weeks later, the beleaguered Shotarian military officially withdrew from Kacon. At Kaldew's belated state funeral, Ait Ugantan brought the hero's 2 small sons and his pregnant widow onto the stage and declared that his descendants would be forever favored by the gods. A new school would be built in his honor to train generations of future Greenbones to protect Kacon and carry on his legacy. Carl Sennington did not speak at the funeral. Afterward, he was overheard saying to his friend, Yun Dorupan, "Others can praise how my son died. All I know is that he is gone, and there is no victory great enough to bring him back." Thank you for stopping by the podcast, everyone, and thanks to Josh for inviting me here. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If you did, please check out my books. Remember that the trilogy concludes with the release of Jade Legacy next year. Until then, stay safe and be well.
Just Joshing is sponsored by Wall of Wishes by Susie Vidori. Wall of Wishes is the conclusion of the Aurora-nominated trilogy by Susie. Ada and Courtney are forced to join forces as the school and the fountain are in danger of going away forever. And if the fountain is destroyed, what will that do to Ada and Courtney? Wall of Wishes is available now at Owl's Nest Books. Click on the link in the description below to place your order. So isn't that cool, guys? I was really, really touched, and I enjoyed listening to that, and I hope you guys did too. Fonda, I thank you. You're an awesome person. You didn't have to do this, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to do it. So guys, just get any of Fonda's books are good. None of them suck. I love Zero Boxer. I love Jade City. And those are my 2 favorites, but her young adult series is good too, so just pick one. I promise you she's going to be worth your time, and she always deserves, she's nominated for the Auroras this year again too. She's ahead of me 2-1, dang it. She totally deserves them. If she wins a 3rd one, that's kudos to her. She has earned every bit of success she has, so Fonda, thank you again. And to everybody else, well, there is going to be no story time next week. I have a 3-part interview with Marcio Catalino that's just phenomenal, and that's going to be the next week's podcast. And then I got a 2-part interview after that with Chase Dagnall, and then I'm going to bring story time back with my next guest, which is going to be Dave Butler. Dave Butler is actually coming on to read for when I get into chapter 5, and I'm still looking for readers. Lots of you have made promises, and I'm calling you all out. If you've made a promise, I'd love to get you guys back on the show to read something. If you haven't and still want to read, contact me. It's open to anybody, and and you never know who's actually going to be reading here next. That will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. You can subscribe to it. I am on every platform you can imagine: iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you want to support this podcast, feel free to do so any way you see fit. I have a book, The Cloud Diver. I have Alice Zero, which should be on order form by the time this airs or shortly thereafter. I have a newsletter you can subscribe to. I have merchandise if you have a couple of dollars to spare, all in the descriptions below. Support Fonda's books. Pick one of hers. They're awesome. Jade City is a really, really good one. Just saying. Do that. My YouTube channel is Joshua Penteloresco. My Twitter, Instagram is jpenteloresco. I'm on LinkedIn as well. Facebook page is Joshua Penteloresco, author, podcaster. Stay inspired. Stay true to yourself. Support each other out there, okay? May the world be better tomorrow than it is today. All right. I'll see you guys next week.
Josh.